What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Alter Your Health podcast. We are live on Instagram and Facebook, as we always are on Thursday afternoons at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. And we've got Winnie joining us in this special episode. Winnie, our cat, is extra meowy today, and that is her nature. But if it's your first time stopping through, welcome. Be sure to like, subscribe, rate, share, wherever you're tuning in. We're on all the platforms and whatever. We appreciate you. And as always, this is your podcast that is the source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation in your life with your health and in the health of our planet. I'm your host, Dr. Benjamin Alter.
And I'm your host, Dr. Susanna Alter.
That was a really long introduction. It's usually not like that, but I was on a rant. I don't know if that's the right word, but I was just blabbering. So we're diving into a topic that Dr. Susanna wanted to dive in today, and that is a topic of sabotage.
Yes.
What does it mean?
Self-sabotage, to be specific.
Is there any other way to sabotage?
That's a good question. What does it mean to self-sabotage? It means to get in your own way, to, for some people, ruin your own life. At least that's how it can seem sometimes. And I want to come out and be honest. I think we all kind of self-sabotage ourselves to some extent. Don't want to point fingers at anyone, but I think it's kind of part of the human experience. But bringing awareness to when we are self-sabotaging ourselves can really help us break free from that. So that's what I want to talk about today.
Yeah, I think, now that you mention awareness, I think awareness is the antidote, the healing of self-sabotage, because when we bring awareness, it dissolves things. It's like that idea and concept that, things that hide in the shadows and lurk in the shadows, all we need to do is put the light on it and then they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
That these shadow elements are gone.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what awareness can bring.
Yeah. And the reason why I thought today would be a good day to talk about self-sabotage is because I recently woke up to the fact that I've been self-sabotaging myself in new creative ways I didn't realize. And, I just want to spend a moment talking about how as humans, Ben and I have talked about this before, but as divine beings having a human experience, life can sometimes throw at us situations that seem like they may be really challenging, may be very hard to get through. And these experiences, these challenges are really for us in a powerful way. And I really experienced that in the last few days when I had the blessing of going through this challenge and realizing, through it, how much I learned going through it, how much I learned about myself, how much awareness I was able to bring to the fact that I was self-sabotaging myself.
Was it a blessing in the moment for you, these challenging times? I don't know specifically what you're talking about, but in the midst of challenge X, Y, or Z, was it in fact a blessing?
Sure doesn't feel that way, that's for sure. Sure doesn't feel that way. But then when we come out of it, many times we can look back and see the silver lining in it all. Always. And I just also want to say, before we dive into things, the reason why Ben and I bring up kind of personal experiences when it comes to our expression of mind, body, spiritual healing is because it's really the best way I found when I learned from people, hearing their personal experiences moving through these things in life.
And not to be selfish or anything, But in sharing personal experiences, being vulnerable, being authentic, opening up, putting it all out there, we experience deepened healing, deepened understanding, deepened awareness. So that is really an invitation. It's like we're taking advantage of that opportunity to deepen in our understanding and healing. And that's really an invitation to anyone out there to be authentic, to be real, to be open and vulnerable in your human experience. And as we are so, we just open up to the healing that's available.
Yes.
So we're not trying to be selfish here on the Alter Your Health podcast, but that I'm kind of just joking. It's
no,
like,
yeah.
It's like we're just being real, but a byproduct of that is like deepened healing for ourselves, because we're not done. We're not done healing. Are you kidding me? So how does this? You talked about recognizing blessings in our challenges. Why did you bring that up? What does that have anything to do with sabotaging your life?
Well, I want to take a step back and introduce this idea of criticism being self-sabotage. And so let that sink in for a second.
Criticism is self-sabotage. And you're talking about criticism of self, of others, of an experience, of anything, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about criticism of anything. Many of us can be guilty of criticizing ourselves, being hard on ourselves, and same goes for those people who are around us. And so how can criticism be a form of self-sabotage? Well, when we look at self-criticism, that's pretty straightforward. If we're criticizing ourselves, or if we're, thinking not great thoughts about ourselves, many times that can actually influence our behavior in the world. So, for example, if I'm walking around with a stuck mental pattern of myself as being inadequate, then I will be less likely to take risks or to step up or to speak out or to whatever it is. That's just one example of how we can really self-sabotage ourselves when we're criticizing ourselves with these negative thought patterns.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
But moving on, how does criticism of others self-sabotage ourselves? And this was the lesson I really learned in the last few days.
Because she was criticizing me.
I was.
And she was suffering for it.
I was really suffering for it.
I say that as if I've never criticized anyone and suffered for it as well. But I think we've all criticized someone other than ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, I think maybe another word just to expand the conversation a little bit is judgment. Criticism equals judgment, equals just beliefs that are, may or may not be true, but are limited and restricted. And that's what criticism and judgment is. We talk about criticism and judgment of others, or criticism and judgment of what is going on in the universe, in our environment, our car breaking down.
That also happens.
We can criticize and judge that. But really, at the end of the day, the only criticism and judgment that we are doing is criticizing and judging ourselves. It's all self-criticism and self-judgment, the way I see it. Because everything in our universe, everything in our reality is a reflection of who we are. It's the reflection of the divine spark inside of each of us. So when we're criticizing the world and things that are, we are in a way just directly criticizing ourselves. And we experience the consequence of that in our low energy, low state of mood, low thinking. So that's my experience, at least. Do you not agree?
No, I mean, that's profound. I love that. And
Mhm.
what I was going to add to that about criticizing those around us. So, whenever we criticize anything in the world, this is the way that I've always explained it. We're actually criticizing the universe or God or the creator
Right.
or whatever you want to call it, because every single human being on this planet is a divine human being, a divine creation that was created that way for a specific reason, for good. And when we criticize it as not good enough or, bad or evil or whatever, then we are, like what Ben was saying, we're going against the natural rhythm, the natural flow of the universe.
Mm-hmm. We're not at peace. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
when we're criticizing anything, including ourselves, we're just simply not at peace. When we're not at peace, we're not in a state of health. We're not in a state of well-being. We're not in a state of healing, and we are therefore sabotaging our life.
Yeah. And I mean, how to break that down a little bit. I think criticism can really sneak in very discreet ways because, for example, I've had this understanding about criticism and how harmful it is to ourselves for years, yet I still go around criticizing things without even knowing it. And I think a great example is criticizing people that we perceive have harmed us. And I think many people can kind of justify, like, well, I don't like him, or
Yeah.
she's bad because she did this, or she did that, or he did this to me, or to so and so, or whatever.
Or I was driving down the road and this guy, ran through the stop sign and hit my car. Like, gosh darn him, like that, what a lousy human being.
Mm-hmm.
And we can have that thought can probably is going to go through our consciousness, that thought of like, God, what an asshole. That's going to go through our consciousness, but that doesn't mean we need to hang on to it and create a reality that crystallizes around that one fleeting thought. Because as we create that reality and form those criticisms and judgments, then we just create tension in our body and constriction in our body, and we are in a state that is not alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we do that, when we crystallize those thought patterns, we make it okay in a way. I think a lot of people make it okay for them to criticize others out of this feeling that they need to defend themselves or protect themselves. Um, Saying,
Right.
you can't do that because that would hurt me.
And that goes back, and that kind of perpetuates this illusion of separation, us versus them, me versus you. Like we are, against one another, or and in the end, like we know that we're all one. I
We
mean,
are.
we're all one. So when we once again express those criticisms and judgments of others, we experience the consequence. And I
Right.
think I trust that, for listeners out there, I trust that you can reflect and think of times where you were judging somebody else, criticizing somebody else. Maybe right now, I'm sure I can think about things that I'm criticizing and judging and wish would be different. And when I think about those kind of things, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good in me. And I think that the more we can bring awareness once again, because that's kind of the magic potion to dissolve these criticisms and judgments, the more we can bring awareness to that, the more they just naturally dissolve back into the nothingness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There's really nothing good that comes from criticism, whether it's of yourself or of others or of what is happening in the world.
Except the feeling of self-righteousness that the ego craves and feeds on.
Right. Which then often leads to trouble.
Yeah.
But I mean, really, it's like carrying around, if you are criticizing or you're not forgiving someone, you are carrying resentment, it's like carrying around like a 500-pound weight with you everywhere.
Yeah, and
There's
sometimes
really,
there's the analogy that we used in our spiritual psychology program that was like a backpack. And we can either let things out of our backpack, let rocks out of our backpack, or we can walk around life picking up rocks, picking up judgments, and holding on to them, putting them in our backpack, walking down this path with this huge backpack that gets heavier and heavier and heavier. And that weighs us down. It weighs us down spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, and we suffer.
yeah. So how does this make us suffer? I think it's still a question. I mean, we talked about how it can create tension inside, how that can lead to physical illness, but really, how does that sabotage your life? Well, let me tell you, because I experienced
All
it.
right, this is where Susanna gets to share her juicy personal happenings, maybe.
Well, it's just that I became aware of how much resentment I was holding on to. And when, like what Ben says, when we weigh ourselves down with that much resentment, judgment, whatever you want to call it, criticism, then yes, like also what Ben said, that lowers our mood. That lowers our ability to see things clearly as they are in this world. And when we are in that lower state, then we are more prone to acting out of that egoic, selfish, righteous place. And you might just have a tantrum if you're Susanna Alter.
Mm-hmm. Consider this, this kind of metaphor analogy just came to mind for me. We talk about perception. We talk about our perception of reality. And one way to think about it is that judgment and criticism is like a filter of perception. And
Yeah.
we can be walking around with these glasses looking into the world through judgment, through criticism, wishing that things were different. These glasses, make everything blurry. They make everything discolored. They distort reality. And we are looking through these glasses, wishing things were different. And really all we could, the solution, the healing could be as simple and easy as taking off the glasses and seeing things clearly for as they are. And really what that means to me is self-acceptance, self-compassion, self-forgiveness, and surrendering to what is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is much easier said than done, of course. If you're out there thinking like, yeah, I react to things in life, in emotional ways, maybe in explosive ways, maybe I act out in ways I don't want to. Well, guess what? You're human.
Yeah.
And being human can be messy sometimes. But I think sometimes when we're able to really see how, that reaction, that way of criticizing, that way of looking at life really doesn't make sense at all, really doesn't serve anything or anyone, actually starts looking a little bit crazy, then we have an opportunity to actually start letting go.
Consider this. Consider that we are judging something, criticizing something, wishing that something were different. And then consider that we become aware of that judgment. We can become aware, gosh, I've been criticizing that person. I've been judging that person. I wish that my job was different. I wish my kids behaved differently. We become aware of that criticism. And then on top of that criticism, we layer this judgment. I shouldn't be criticizing that person. I shouldn't be criticizing the world. And we have this judgment sandwich, and that's even heavier.
Mm-hmm.
So the way out is not judging the criticism.
Mm-hmm.
The way out is pure awareness, not awareness from your ego perspective and thinking I should be different, because that's just another layer of judgment. That's just more rocks in the backpack that we're dragging down this path. So I think it's important to tweeze that apart from authentic awareness versus like, you know, things
Right.
should be different.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes self-awareness can just lead to more self-criticism.
Yeah.
And that's harmful. And so, yeah, I think I agree with you. The way out is authentic awareness. And I mean, we got to bring up the F word, forgiveness.
I brought it up just in fleeting forgiveness.
But let's spend some time on this beautiful word.
Maybe just a few moments.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times we think of forgiveness in the context of, oh, I forgive you for causing that act of harm against me. But I think really what we mean by forgiveness is forgiveness of, like, when you break down the word forgive, it's like to allow in a way.
You're giving freedom. You're giving forgiveness. You're giving acceptance. You're giving peace.
You're giving acceptance. It's not forgiving a person. It's not even forgiving yourself. I look at it as you're forgiving the universe. Well, because a lot of times our upset is at the universe.
I mean, a lot of people talk about self-forgiveness, and we've talked a lot about self-forgiveness, but the true self, the authentic self, doesn't need forgiveness.
That's true.
Self-forgiveness is an egoic act. So forgiveness in the truest sense of the word is just
letting go.
Forgiving. Like you're saying, like just giving acceptance, giving, and it doesn't have to be targeted towards that person or the self or
God. God doesn't need forgiveness.
Nobody needs forgiveness. It's
something to let yourself off the hook of criticism.
Yeah, the consequence. I mean, but once again, it's your authentic self isn't on the hook. You can't be on the hook. Your authentic self is pure awareness, pure love. We know that. But so self-forgiveness is letting your ego off the hook.
Yeah.
And easing that tension, that constriction, and that pain that we carry through life when we're in a constant state of judgment and criticism.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we talked about kind of awareness as being really a key element, because what are we going to do without awareness?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are walking down the street criticizing, judging, criticism, judgment, criticism, judgment, criticism, judgment, and they don't really know it.
Mm-hmm.
So pure awareness is important from a place of the authentic self and non-judgment, not thinking, not like becoming aware and beating yourself down for it. And then from a state of awareness, I think naturally, from a state of authentic awareness, naturally, there is forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. It's true. It all comes together.
Winnie agrees. So, want to wrap up?
Yeah. I also just want to kind of touch on, I think this is helpful for people to hear, including, myself and you, that when we perceive someone as acting out of line, as, reacting, being emotional, we can look at some people causing awful acts of harm in the world and realize that those people, the only reason why they would be doing so is because they are hurting so much deeply inside.
Yeah. So that's where authentic compassion comes from. It comes from a place of, compassion means being with suffering. Passion means suffering. And compassion means being with suffering. So when we're compassionate with ourselves, or when we're compassionate with others, we're recognizing that hurts, and we're being with it from a place of pure acceptance, pure awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't need to approve of that harmful action.
But you can be with it. The invitation is being with it from a neutral, compassionate place, which doesn't, it's like the hardest thing humans can do in some instances.
Yeah. So anyway, we kind of went all over the place in this episode, but really the message that we want to
hammer in
is that criticism of anything in life is a form of self-sabotage. It doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve society. It doesn't serve anything really. All it really does is cause tension, low mood, which can then lead to harmful acts.
And I just want to sprinkle in there that, we're talking about criticism and judgment as being self-sabotage, but we're also alluding to the fact that criticism and judgment is a natural part of the human experience.
It's true.
We are wired to criticize, we are wired to judge, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
So don't criticize yourself for criticizing anything.
The awareness, the less amount of time we can stay in the state of criticism and judgment, the better. Criticism, judgment, inevitable. Living your life in a perpetual state of criticism and judgment, unnecessary.
Yeah, it's
and
so
it
true.
leads to all sorts of health issues. We know. So thanks for your attention. Thanks for tuning in. If this resonated, if this clicked, if this brought some sort of insight, we would love to hear. Let us know what you think with a comment, a like, a subscribe, a rating, a review, a share. Once again, we do really appreciate and value your time and attention and your engagement in this podcast. So we look forward to seeing you next time on Alter Your Health Live. Once again, Thursdays, 1 p.m. Mountain Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. And that's all, folks.
Okay.
Peace
see you next week.
And love. See you next time.